Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. We are going to have a challenging topic and very distinguished panel. I would like to welcome also those who are following us over web stream. And thank to the Wilfried Martens Center and also to the foundation of Anton Tunega. Thanks to these foundations we can be here today, and I hope that we have a very interesting and challenging discussion ahead of us. We're going to talk about the challenge goes local, integration of minorities, and maybe I would extend this topic also because I don't think the challenge goes local now. I think the challenge is local already for some time, and it will be good to connect the past and the future challenges related to minorities and maybe immigration and refugees with the European past and the way how we were dealing with some of the challenges related to minorities among us and cultural differences before. I have a very distinguished panel to welcome. I would like to welcome to my left Jan FIGEљ, former and first Slovak commissioner and also former Prime Minister of Slovakia, the country, Deputy Prime Minister of Slovakia, sorry, my mistake. Then I would like to welcome Cecile, who is a program manager and Joint Migration and Development Institute at the UNDP. And to her left, we have Peter GIRASEK, who is a Catholic priest and a Jesuit, and a person who has worked in Beyrut at the camp which is called Frans van der Lugt Jesuits Refugee Camp. So we have a very distinguished panel, but we have another very distinguished guest with us who I would like to ask to maybe open this topic. It's the president of the Wilfried Martens Center and a former Prime Minister of Slovakia, Mr. Mikuláš DZURINDA.
Too many former prime ministers and vice prime ministers from so big countries, Slovakia is. Dear friends, dear Miriam, ladies and gentlemen, when I was reading the title of our panel, I have come to realize that the question of integration of minority is very broad and it should be narrowed. But before jumping into the question, I would like to thank Anton Tunega Foundation for taking initiative and picking up such an important issue as integration of different sorts of minorities undeniably is. So, as I have already indicated, I have arrived, or I'm coming from the country which is not very big, but which is very rich on minorities. We are a very multi-ethnical society, rich on different, especially national minorities. In the past, we had been facing several challenges. One of them was our coexistence with ethnic or national minorities, especially with Hungarians. There is around 8, 9, 10% of Hungarians in Slovakia. And they were worried about assimilation. So it was not easy to manage good relations, but we have succeeded at the end. And now the issue is in these days not very hot, I would say. Maybe also because of a lot of reforms, including decentralization. The other, I would admit, a latent, long-run challenge is the integration of Roma minority, and not only in Slovakia, not only in our neighboring countries, but this challenge is still very, very, very big and very topical for many European countries. But in these days, I would like to deal with some different sort of minority, and no surprise for you that I'm thinking about a really religious minority, especially in relation or in respect of immigration. Maybe in these days this is a paradoxical situation because there is no minaret in Slovakia yet. There is no major Muslim community in my country, but there is a huge debate, huge discussion especially in relation with quota system when it comes to distribution of refugees or asylum seekers. So I would like to use my privilege to open such sensitive, such challenging panel, being a bit provocative, running to the issue, to the point. You may know very well that Slovakia, together with other Visegrad 4 countries, has refused the quota system of immigrants. These countries are very reserved towards the process of new or common asylum policy. The other sensitive issue is that all 4 Visegrad countries are more in favor to integrate Christians from the Middle East, from Syria, from Iraq, from Africa, if necessary. And this question is really controversial. We could follow a very sensitive discussion in the European Parliament, but also in our media, this question is very, very heavily discussed. And the composition of the panel gives us a good opportunity to elaborate this issue in a very free and open atmosphere. Is such an approach of the Visegrad 4 countries sustainable? Is such an approach of our countries morally acceptable? I have to admit that it is very popular inside of our societies, but less popular beyond the Visegrad 4. So again, I warmly welcome this opportunity, especially on the ground of NGO, European NGO, to freely discuss such a sensitive question. I have been thinking since the beginning why it is so. Why people not having a lot of experience with the Muslim world are so reserved, so worried. Is Herman Van Rompuy right if he's stating, I was listening to him repeatedly, how he's trying to explain that people in our societies are exposed to new culture, to new challenges, and they have a rising feeling that they are not protected enough. Is the main reason why we are so reserved, especially towards Muslim community. I was listening Prime Minister Seehofer from Bavaria a week ago in Innsbruck, when mentioning that especially people belonging to Muslim community do not want to live with us, he mentioned. They want to live next to us, or some of them even against to us. If it is so, the question is, should we motivate people to be integrated? Or should we force minority to be integrated? How to manage the coexistence of this different, I would say, culture and religious groups of people? Or maybe at the end of my introductory remarks and thoughts, I should go back to the potential single or common asylum policy. The question is whether is it a good idea or whether it should be strictly defended, this issue. I mean, asylum policy as a national competence. If it is better to concentrate or to unite this very sensitive policy, on which pillars should be built potential future common asylum policy? And maybe one of the latest questions is also a legitimate one, I believe. To integrate minorities. to trying to do our best. Is the space for the integration unlimited? Or whether does it exist something like absorption capacity in our societies? Is it a legitimate question? People are asking. My experience is that people are asking. If there is something like absorption capacity of our societies, how to deal with the other asylum seekers? Two latest questions. Are the immigrants or asylum seekers obliged to accept not only our rule of law, our legislation, but also our culture, the culture of the host country? Or should it be arranged differently? And maybe absolutely last question from my side is a question which is disturbing me or which is arising pretty often. In the light of this discussion, do we still accept something like collective rights of minorities? Or will we promote in the future very strictly individual rights of persons belonging to minorities? So, dear friends, I have been learned that the privilege of a kick-offer is to formulate the questions, not to strive or to look for the right answers. As you could observe, I have been enjoying this privilege a lot. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Mr. DZURINDA. I can tell you, and I think you have seen now that Mr. DZURINDA had never problems in falling into the trap of politically correct questions, because he was always a free person to ask questions which were provocative, but always helped to come to good policies as a solution. So thank you very much for these provocations as well, and then I hope we'll be able to maybe answer at least partially some of your questions, or at least move forward the debate to the answers. And the next speaker I would like to give the floor to is Mr. FIGEљ. Mr. FIGEљ, as a former commissioner for culture, education and youth, and you have been commissioned before the whole refugee crisis has started. Could you see maybe what might be the causes for the current challenges, why we are unable to deal with the challenge we have got, and where do you think the causes might lay with the experience of a commissioner? And maybe I will come with one quote, which as another provocation, as you probably know all this quote because Chancellor Merkel has said it already a couple of times, and it went viral. But I would like to come back to this quote: "Multikulti ist gescheitert or wrecked." Is it really? I mean, I understand that she's also one of the persons who doesn't have a problem with provocative statements and questions, but she has expressed certain concerns about our ability to be a multicultural society. So, Mr. FIGEљ, if you could maybe give us your thoughts on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, not only for the questions and quotes, but really for this forum and networking, which is organized under the umbrella of Wilfried Martens Center. I pay tribute to his personality and to his hearers, or those who believe that Europe whole and free is our invitation, is our responsibility, and that we have turned challenges into opportunities. My father, who died before the collapse of communism, would love to have our seminars or debates. Generations had either no freedom or opportunity to decide upon the continent about global issues. In the 20th century, people were running away from Europe or have been expelled from Europe. Now people try to get into Europe. Which situation is better for you, for us, for today, for tomorrow? I mean, we are a lucky generation. but of course it's demanding to give answers, not only comparisons or descriptions, because Europe now is much more attractive, interesting, rich, but of course that's not end of history or end of our destiny. Education and culture are important, not only because you said it or I was with that, but the most influential factor lifelong in human life is upbringing and education in full sense. And culture is on the top of hierarchy. Daily bread economy is a necessity. But what we believe in, what we respect, what we long for is on the top of our values. That's why culture is so important, so influential. And to be aware of it and to deal seriously in this manner is a role for Europe, because as Schuman said and invited us, Europe should be a leader of humanity. And that's about humanity. And think globally, act locally. This is something what we usually connect with environment, with some other areas, but here again, this global and continental challenge has local responses. Of course, national and European as well, whether common or how much common or what to do on European or EU level. But then if we are to live together, it is locally. And the role of education is indispensable, because it is about citizenship, it is about cultural awareness, it is about cultural self-expression, it is about employment and employability of individuals, it is about social inclusion. So many aspects come via education that it's indispensable. And therefore access and relevance, or better to say quality of education, is a criterion or double objective, both access and relevance. And here I mean those who are to be integrated. Not absorbed, not assimilated, but integrated. This is the sense of integration. And integration, in my understanding, is participation, much more than anything else. Participation on the base of common ground, equality, in the same society, of course, with all differences which are visible or important for society. Here, East and West sort of differ, or we see now groupings or different tendencies. I think that Central Eastern Europe has much more either questions or experiences with Roma inclusion, integration, where a lot is now done, much more should be still done. And much more is in the West with the integration or experience with integration of people from Middle East or North Africa, from other continents. Roma itself is the largest minority on the continent without one state, but it's a minority which can be defined in many countries, centuries old in Europe. And then we have new minorities, including the new wave since the last war on the Middle East. People coming because of war, because of conflicts, because of droughts or poverty. Both groupings or minorities face different but also common problems. Especially two I want to mention. Usually it's poverty and social exclusion. Poverty and social exclusion. In my country, in Slovakia, which is well represented around, we are part of family, and I'm glad that we can contribute, not only consume, but contribute to European answers and future and also capacity. We have rich experience with integration of Roma. As I said, it is about participation, first of all. And as a participation on base of equality. It's well known that ignorance breeds intolerance. If in society problems are ignored or some groups are ignored, the result will not be the absorption of the problem, but extremism or populism in politics. And usually fanatics or extremists or populists use this space for their intentions, for their objectives. In terms of integration, we focus on 5 basic areas. It's education, as I said, housing policy, employment, healthcare, and social services. This is process. It's not about short-term and very fast issues, but when it is well settled and implemented with the participation of those who are to be integrated, there are results, positive and encouraging. It is a challenge and invitation for both majority and minority. There are, of course, usually problems or threats or barriers. The biggest threat for successful integration is segregation, a division, separation from. It leads to living, to the parallel societies, to living next to, not to living with or together. The biggest barrier is poverty. Poverty, which has so many implications. Successful integration leads to win-win answers. It's beneficial for both minority and majority. And the biggest enemy is ignorance, as I mentioned, intolerance, incompetence, bureaucracy, and everything what doesn't lead to efficient steps, efficient processes. I don't want to dwell on special issues which we have developed and have already in place in many regions or municipalities, but as I said, all means, whether national, European, regional or local, should be used to bring the potential to make society not only integrated but creative. Professor Richard Florida, whom I like to mention, spoke about 3 conditions for creative society, and creativity is a human talent, human contribution to make life better, more perspective. It's a tolerance, talent, tolerance, and technology. 3 T's. Everybody got a talent. We need to equip and to give access to new technologies, new possibilities, opportunities to all, and then to also be tolerant in promoting talents of all. Concerning migrants, or the other half of the picture, it is much more about community dialogue and community cooperation than just acting vis-à-vis, acting in favor of. To your question, Miriam, on multiculti, as commissioner I preferred and I continue to prefer intercultural approach, intercultural competencies, because it speaks about interest, knowledge, respect, mutuality, but not a melange or melting pot or kind of averageness of everything. I think that intercultural Europe is the best portrait for future because culture is important, and in intercultural relationship it's enriching. 1 + 1 is more than 2 because it's not mathematics, it's synergy, it's ethics. Of course, there are so many issues to be dealt with, like language. If we believe that culture is important, then cultural aspect number 1 is mother tongue, which is first language of communication. We need to give opportunities for preschool education with the inclusion of parents. To recognize qualifications, I have good examples from Spain, or this preschool from Vienna, in Bayern, in Munich, which was mentioned by Mikuláš. They have now a good system of volunteering where people like judges, prosecutors, teachers voluntarily teach migrants about the system, about culture, values, history, because they believe it's important for integration. To the conclusion, I want to say three messages. First, we need to use national and European institutions to give a frame, especially legal frame, for local conditions, because implementation of integration is local. It is about people living in the neighborhoods. If there are problems, then also central authorities have to help to make local conditions fully in line with the national and European framework. Secondly, financial aid, which is now quite visible and quite strong from European or national level, should be linked and accessible to local communities, to local authorities. The less bureaucracy, the less intermediation, more direct access and action. And third, we need to train and prepare people, professionals, administrators, human capacities for local or regional work with migrants, with those in need, who know specificities of migrants, their culture, their values, traditions, and can help to educate. The last message, which I believe is rather of a complex nature: siblings of evil are fear and indifference. Where these siblings are very present, autocrats, totalitarian politicians, even regimes are growing. Extremism is quite strong, and problems are the result, even conflicts. I forge against fear, because each democracy, local or national, needs citizens which are courageous and brave. These two is enough to keep democracy living, working, functioning, delivering. And the last to bring to your attention is, from each crisis, whether local or global, the road leads through combination of sound reason and living consciousness. Sound reason and living responsive consciousness. I wish this forum, Wilfried Martens Center, Anton Tunega Foundation, and all partners will contribute to European questions, especially via sound reason and living consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. RIALLANT, the discussion on the refugee and the current challenge of integration, which is the refugee crisis or refugee challenge, is often narrowed by media and different forums to the quota discussions. But obviously, I mean, the whole question has a different aspects and should not be that narrowed down this way. And the two distinguished speakers before you have already brought some positive examples from local or national level or European level, how Europe has a long-standing history of dealing with the issue or dealing with this challenge of integration or immigration or migration. And I would like to ask you, as a representative of an organization which is dealing with this question for decades, maybe give us some positive examples and maybe some success stories which can maybe bring this discussion in a positive way. And also, I mean, let's not discuss only the current crisis, but maybe let's go back a little bit to the past and see how we were dealing with the challenge previously and what lessons can be learned from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here today, definitely addressing some extremely important issues here. And before really diving into the good news and the positive side of the story, and there's a lot to say about it, I'd like maybe to address some of the points that you kindly put to our attention in your initial speech. I think what is really important is that we have a vision of the world where history is an evolving phenomenon, where we have a past and we have a future, and the present is just a present. And trying to really have the discussion, thinking that identities are set for always, forever, that they are monolithic vision of our society, of our cultures, I think is utterly wrong, because that's a fact. Our societies have evolved and will continue to evolve, and therefore forming policies just by looking at a picture of a society as it is at a particular point in time leads us, I think, to make extremely wrong decisions. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge the fact that also our societies are vastly changing, and of course some of our societies are changing not at the same pace, and maybe that's the pace that needs to be addressed, but we do live now in a world in the 21st century where we don't hold one identity anymore. All of us will have different identities at the same time. And as I was saying earlier in the morning in another panel, our world is about transnationalism. Our world is about our ability to interact with different parts, different territories at any one time because of the economic activities in which we're engaged, or because of the family types that we have, because of our professions, so on and so forth. We don't belong to one society or to one identity anymore. And I think it's really high time that our societies and the way, for example, we look into identity, the way we look into citizenship, the way we look into rights and obligations is kind of really considered within this new reality. And somehow I feel that we're using still these old ways of looking at the world without really acknowledging that this is a major fundamental change that we're witnessing, and it's really high time that we don't speak about identity in the same way we have been talking about it so far. Because A, we know that it's extremely dangerous because it's politically instrumentalized always for the worst, and there's much more to identity that we can build from if we acknowledge the fact that we have all these different ways of being and thinking, and that's a real richness. And also diversity, is something that is extremely difficult to address in many different ways. And I think we tend to block on the issue of ethnic diversity or diversity because of different religions. And we seem to think that this is the dividing line. And we tend to have policy responses or bad policy responses along those lines. But actually, the problem in our societies, and I'd like to really echo a lot of what was being said and what we're trying to do when we talk about integration of minorities, integration of migrants, is more to look into social cohesion issues. It's more to look into the ability of those newcomers in our society to thrive in the society, and their ability to have access to essential services, and education being a very important one. So I think we tend to have a debate that really use still some wrong criteria, and that leads us collectively in making wrong decisions. And I think that's a really that's something we have to do, is really invent policies that are fit for the 21st century. It's high time we do that. But we are just at the beginning of 21st century, so we have a bit of time ahead of ourselves. But I just hope that this is not going to have, the debate as it is put right now in Europe is extremely problematic. And this may actually have an impact on what we're trying to do as a European Union. And I work for the United Nations, so I shouldn't say we, but I'm French, so I'm part of this group. But I think the consequences of the way the debate is put right now could be really terribly wrong for the coming generations. Our responsibility is really strong here. What I want to make as main point in my intervention is, indeed, there are very good news in terms of what we can do for integration. And here I'm only referring to integration of migrants or refugees. I'm not going to address the issue of minorities like the Roma minority, for example. First, we have to acknowledge that mostly refugees and migrants arrive in cities. So when we talk about the level of governance that is the most adequate to look into proper integration policies, we have to, go towards that particular dimension. And that's really important because really 60% of the total number of refugees, or 80% of the internally displaced, are thought to live in urban areas. So that's a major reality. And this is within this context that local and regional authorities are increasingly responsible for issues ranging from integration or reintegration when migrants go back home, legal protection, education, public order, economic development, health, urban planning, just name it. So these are really enormously important areas of policies. But the problem is that most of the time, this level of governance is not well equipped to play that role, because we know very well that migration policies as well as integration policies are mostly framed at national level, driven by national political and policy agendas, and therefore we have that inadequacy. And I think what is really one of the very good things that is coming out of what is being called a refugee or migrant crisis, and there's a lot to say again about that terminology, is that we can see that cities are emerging as real actors in this. And I don't know if you've read recently a report that was published by Eurocities that looked into the way different cities across Europe, in particular, have been responding to this crisis. And it's extremely interesting to see that. Indeed, because local and regional authorities are the ones that are the best placed to manage human mobility for development prospects. And I want to talk about human mobility, if you allow me, because we talk about migration and we know very well that this term has become toxic to a large extent. And in fact, we should really much more talk about human mobility, because human mobility is about also people moving from rural to urban areas. It's about, because it's a continuum of movement, and we have also in policy terms to acknowledge the fact that it's not only about crossing borders. Mobility is much more than this, and when we want to talk about good policy options, this, I think, is a very interesting concept that we should be using. So local and regional authorities are the ones that have the close proximity to their constituencies. They are the ones that are able to initiate multi-stakeholder dialogue, that are able to really pull together the private sector in the local context, the civil society, and also make sure to organize services given to the population in such a way that it can be inclusive as well of the specific needs of migrants, of refugees, so on and so forth. And very importantly, that responsibility is huge, because if we want migrants to indeed become active members of our society and well integrated, it is really important to uphold what we call their development potential. So their ability to thrive in this society will also make them able to be actors of the development of the territories where they come from. Because again, when we speak about the relationship between migration and development, we tend to think, okay, what do migrants do for their home countries? What do they do through their remittances, through their social investment, and so on? But we should also start to think what they do for the development of the host societies, and how well the host societies allow them to thrive so that they can become indeed effective development actors for their host societies, so for their home countries. So this continuum is extremely important, and we have a very important role to play in that respect. And what I like to say is that cities in particular are extremely interesting implementation laboratories for migration practitioners, because they draw timely observations, they develop practical solutions, and apply inventive approaches to migration and development. So let me go to an example here in Europe. That is the one of the city of Palermo. As you know, Palermo has, Italy being one of the entry doors towards the European Union, has been really on the front line. And what was really interesting is to see what political leadership can do, because at the end of the day, when we talk about integration, it's all about the kind of leadership that the people in charge actually showing, and how they can lead the population that elected them. And what the mayor of Palermo did was to issue a charter that formally abolished the migrant residence permits and said, all of us are, and you including the newcomers, you are citizens of my commune and you belong here. And that's extremely powerful, because it's really redefining who belongs and who doesn't belong, who has access to services, who doesn't have access to services. And that may be the migratory status is not what matters. And really, so it's really interesting to see how in local context, because you can really completely shift the debate. Something very similar is being implemented right now in the city of New York. City of New York is where diversity thrives. And it's really interesting again that they have put in place a system of identity card, irrespective of migratory status of people. Basically, it gives you the ability to have access to all services given by the city. So everybody is a citizen of the city. You may be not an American citizen, but you're a citizen of New York. And again, that's a very powerful message that is being sent, because it's a very effective way to make sure that everybody is integrated and can participate and thrive in the city. So basically, these are some very interesting examples, and I'd like also to refer to another example, this time led by a provincial government in Ecuador that has been unfortunately badly hit by this very recent earthquake. The Ecuador is one of the countries that has decided that they have a universal citizenship. So whoever goes to Ecuador is a citizen of Ecuador. Again, that's very interesting because it tells us a lot about how we define identity. How do we you define who belongs and who doesn't belong? It doesn't have to be in the way we have defined it so far. And basically, I like to mention the work that is being done by the provincial government of Pichincha, which is basically where the capital city, Quito, is located. And under the leadership, one more time, of the mayors, because it's something that has started with a former mayor and that is being pursued with the current mayors, they have set up a mobility that a unit that is dealing with human mobility. Again, this particular concept being used, and as I said before, I think it's a very powerful one. So basically, what they are trying to do is really to make sure that within the context of the province, every newcomer can be integrated. And they go at great length, in fact, in doing that. And I find that very interesting because they look, for example, into the very crucial issue of integration within the labor market. And we know that one of the main issues and one of the main obstacles for migrants to have access to the labor market is the problem of recognition of skills. So what the provincial government has done is that they have developed an entire system of skills certification. So it really eases the ability of migrants to have their skills certified and therefore to be able to access employment at levels of skills that do correspond to what they have, so that there is no waste of the skills that they bring. And that's very important. They also look into other issues that for me are quite often overlooked. We talk to migrants, you have to integrate, but we also forget that those people, most of the time, they have gone through really traumatic situations. We have to acknowledge that the issue of mental health is extremely important on the path to integration. And again, this provincial government, they have set up an entire unit that is really looking into that and helping migrants to deal with the trauma that has been associated with the movement that they went through. And through the help of the program that I managed, the Joint Migration and Development Initiative, what we are doing is really trying to make sure that those initiatives that we're supporting in different parts of the world, on different continents, are being scaled up, institutionalized, but also that they influence policy making at national level. And for us, it's really important. Working local is extremely important, but also we have to make sure that we impact national legislation, that fiscal resources are being given to local and regional authorities, to cities, to deal with this phenomenon, and also proper, responsibilities, devoluted to those centralized levels of governance. There's a lot of work that is being done in that respect. And also, I think, as international community, it's really important that we advocate for the inclusion of migration in different global dialogues that are taking place. One that has been successful is the fact that migration is now part of the new development agenda, so the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that are acknowledging the fact that migration and development are closely related. And that has a tremendous impact. It may sound like just a declaration, but actually this is going to drive policies in the coming decades. As well, right now, there's a very important dialogue that is going on that is called Habitat 3, and we are going to have, at the end of this dialogue, what should be the new urban agenda. And again, what we're trying to do is to make sure that the issue of migration is being completely factored in that new urban agenda, in order precisely to make sure that issues related to integration and others will be properly reflected there. So my main message is really to say that there's a lot of work that is being done in local context, lots of successful examples. So our societies are thriving thanks to diversity. Diversity is a very important phenomenon that we need to welcome, that we need to manage. Of course, it has a lot of challenges, but again, the role of cities in particular is extremely important in that respect. And we need to support them in that role. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this inspiring list of policies and innovations or approaches to the different challenges we are facing in terms of integrating minorities. And I'm very grateful that Father GIRASEK was able to accept our invitation, because he is an example. I mean, all of these policies will never work when there is no person who is a carrier of the change, or carrier of the challenge, carrier of the idea, who fights with all the challenges every idea in our world is always related to. And that's why I'm happy to welcome Father GIRASEK with us, because he has an experience of a person who brought bridge from Europe, from Christian cultures, from the ways how we see human rights, how we see our culture directly into the Middle East, and is bringing maybe the light of receival from Europe into among those people who are seeking home and new homes in Europe. So Father GIRASEK, the floor is yours. And maybe one more thing, Father GIRASEK is going to use a PowerPoint, and I'm very happy that the church is not always old-fashioned. So
I would like to thank you to Anton Tunega Foundation for this invitation, and to my respected panelists who had a word before me, because some of the things will resonate also in my presentation. I would start maybe in this way, that it's very different feelings to be here, although we don't know each other, but we are Europeans, or let's say part of a certain culture. We understand each other, we feel safe. It's different than, let's say, to be 10 kilometers from Syrian borders, among the people who are refugees, Muslims, but not being afraid of them, but being afraid of some mad men who would cross the border accidentally and do something which is not nice. So this was, let's say, my feeling when I was in different Jesuit refugee centers across Lebanon, or even being in Erbil, just a short visit, 5 days, seeing our projects there for Iraqi refugees, IDPs, internally displaced people, of mostly Christians and Yazidis who were flowing because of ISIS. So I would bring this as a value here, and I'm not taking it for granted, really. I have I would say, short presentation. I use picture because I like pictures, and it's sometimes pictures are speaking more than maybe what I'm able to speak about, my words. I would like to do my presentation in a way that we were hearing about manifold identity, let's say, that no one has just one identity. I am, let's say, a Catholic priest, but also European. I'm Slovak. I'm from eastern part of Slovakia, so it also makes my identity. And I would bring also this, that refugees are not just refugees or IDPs, but they are, first of all, they are human. So there's a ground we are sharing. And I think it's different identities can be used either for exclusion, as we heard, or inclusion. So something what connects us. And also we heard about nice, very inspiring thought that Europe should be a leader in humanity. So my presentation is actually, I would like to present you, you heard probably about the man, Frans van der Lugt, Jesuit priest. 7th of April was second anniversary of this assassination, being shot in a Jesuit garden house in Homs. He was the only one, probably the last European being there, as a word for the people who have no voice, actually. So this is one thing, his personality, and yes, he's priest, he's Catholic, but he's human and see others as humans. So no exclusion on any ground. And the second point I would like to make in my presentation, very briefly, is about Frans van der Lugt Center in Beyrut, Jesuit Refugee Center, which is inspired by his values, I would say, and it's a nice example of how certain things, I would say, are working really. And the third part of my presentation will be some kind of, maybe my personal observation or something that I would like to share. As a Jesuit, our spirituality is really also to share, and to share not just what is precious for me, but also to share what is precious from others. So let's build kind of virtual dialogue in this way. So let's start. So very briefly, you can see Abuna Frans, called Abuna is an Arabic title or addressing priest, like Father Frans. So he was a Jesuit, born 10th of April 38 in Hague, Netherlands. Doctor in psychology, lived for almost 50 years in Syria. As I mentioned, yeah, he was a victim of, we don't know whom actually, because no one claimed really. So it's difficult to say. But, what's significant about him, I would say, he was a founder of so-called Al-Ard, so the Earth Foundation, near Homs. He realized the need, really, with others, young people, to set up a center for disabled people, to make kind of like daily stationery, or give them chance in the society which is not valuing maybe very much their contribution. So I put some figures about trees, just to make, in Syria, where I had the chance to visit Syria before war in 2010, and also Homs and this center as well. Trees are something which is valuable, and ground and water we are having here. And it makes life. There's a strong difference between desert and kind of oasis. So its objectives were really to bring together Muslims, Christians, or different nationalities. Let's say they are Kurds, but not acknowledged as Kurds, but let's say bring them together and do something good. Acknowledge our common ground as humans and as citizens of the earth, I would say. You can see the picture. This is from our Jesuit community in Homs. Now it looks differently. Not very nice pictures because it was hit by some bombs, etc. But you can see the people around France, Abuna Frans, are not just Christians, they are Muslims. Because they felt something human. They called him Abuna, whether they were Christians or Muslims, doesn't matter. So he was called like friend of Christians and Muslims. He was not a man to speak about dialogue. he would say, let us come into silence. Let us pray together in silence, maybe. Let us be together. Let us celebrate. Let us walk. So something which is very common, very human. And as I mentioned, was probably the last European in homes. He refused to go out of homes when by the regime, siege by regime, he refused because it would be destroyed totally. And he was giving true information about the situation, really, about the starving, and about that it's not everything that automatically, whatever, rebels are bad and doing this kind of stuff, whatever. So dementing false information. Yeah, one of the maybe strong personalities who addressed loss of Abuna Frans was also Pope Francis, really, who acknowledged the value of this person. There is a short quotation. Let me continue now. You see the image of kids. This was taken in, I think, last March. Kids. This is just shortly. It's in Burj Hamud, part of like wider Beyrut, but you wouldn't know where Beyrut finished because it's continuously a lot of buildings, and it's the the highest populated area in the Middle East. Small area, but really full of houses, people, and therefore, because it's cheap, lodging cheap, rather cheap in comparison with other parts of Beirut, it's an attraction for refugees. So a lot of mostly Syrian refugees are there. In small area, they are like 100,000 local people and 70,000 refugees in very small area. And it offers for refugees educational activities for children. Currently, it's kindergarten. It's very much appreciated. Why? Because people, how they are living, as we heard, the majority are urban refugees, and that's exactly the point in Lebanon. There are no refugee camps, only Palestinians, but not official refugee camps allowed in Beirut, in Lebanon. So they are living, sharing one room, 3 families, sometimes in a way that in order to sleep they have to sit. It will be impossible to sleep straight. Without window, only doors. Maybe what we are doing also this kindergarten. So for kids, it's a place to be. I would say maybe a normal place, because if you have no place really for everything is in one room. So before Lebanese government prohibited all NGOs to do educational, formal or informal educational services, we did also kind of accelerated learning program or this kind of stuff, prepare them for schools. Prepare for the schools means to make them able to sit in the class, to be fed, actually, not to be hungry, and to learn them to learn, actually, because some of them for 5 years haven't been in school. I mean, some of them have never visited school yet in their life because of the Syrian war, and moving from different parts to another, first as IDPs, then as refugees, whatever. So also basic courses for mothers, like basic healthcare, baby nutrition, and this kind of stuff. Yes, I would point some of the principles we are operating, let's say, with. And first of all, I would say is inclusion, open to all, regardless faith or whatever, political affiliation, whatever. It doesn't matter for us. What matters is that you are in need, and we, thanks to others, would like to provide what what we are able to do. And conviction that to make a positive change in the life of my fellow human being has an interesting value in itself. So, no space for proselytism. I am not producing there, or we are not producing new Christians, new Catholics, or whatever. It's not at all agenda. Value of human is in him or herself. And freedom of his belief, this is the most important. So the message is not to impose something, but to help and to share, really. This is something what is very interesting to me, really. As a priest, that I have freedom, that I don't need to do anything, you know. This is an example of Mother Teresa in India, not producing new Christians out of Hindus. No. It's faith-based, yes, Christian notion of charity. And this is, I would say, this inclusion or this view, it's there actually. This picture is also there from the center. I am coming to the last point, last 2 or 3 slides, and it's experience from Lebanon. I would use these pictures together with Fatima. You see the lady in front in hijab, Muslim lady, our psychologist in the center, because as we heard, there are a lot of mental problems, a lot of stress, a lot of really traumas, a lot of violence. So together with her, on the first anniversary of Frans van der Lugt being shot, we presented kind of program for kids to bring these values of this man, who was important for Muslims and Christians, and also to speak about. We did it in a playful way, actually. That Christians in the class were speaking about what they know about Muslims, and they wrote nicely in Arabic. And the Muslims, vice versa, they wrote about what they know about Christians. They presented it, and Muslims could correct the view of Christians, and the vice versa, Christians about Muslims. And it worked perfectly. And at last of part of the session, each session was 2 minutes of silent prayer. You know, religion in Middle East is important, but it's not always, it's misused by some, but used as daily bread for many, both Christians or Muslims, really. So, for me, the strongest point, if nothing else, was prayer of kids. Really, you can imagine kids were very lively before, but when we said that we are going to pray for the peace in Iraq, the peace in Syria, it was silent, that you could hear, the slightest noise, sound. Muslims prayed in this way, Christians in this way, kids. So they prayed Abana, our Father. And I would say maybe kind of when there were some questions, it's also nice Ignatian, the Jesuit approach to put further questions to make me think, to make deepen. So yes, who are those Abuna Francis, Europeans to be inspirational figures, witnesses for current divided humanity, I would say. Is there something Europe can offer a lesson? I would point a humble lesson, because we know in Europe that it wasn't easy, and there were a lot of things need of reconciliation in our history, past and present even. So journey we can offer, what we have learned,
how can European legacy, both secular and religious, contribute to making a positive change in the life of others? I pointed Syrian and Iraqi refugees, but it can be IDPs, whoever who is in need. And what about me? What are my convictions about others? Whether we want, admit it or not, we have convictions. And the question is maybe how dialogical they are. Am I listening, or I have already kind of like concept in me? So perceiving other person, I know who you are. Or am I open? And what can be my contribution? Responsibility. And this is another picture. I like it very much, really. I don't need to speak very much about it. You can see, I would just short description. You see on her back towards us, Christian refugee from Iraq, from Mosul, flying from ISIS, debating with Syrian refugee, Muslim, about these differences, what they know. And I would put this question, is sincere dialogue, discussion, openness, friendship, faith, just for kids? Is it maybe something these kids can learn, their, let's say, fathers, mothers, or people in Syria who are fighting? Is it just a dream, this Fata Morgana, or a goal to achieve? I would bring as a conclusion one thing, that I was never afraid being among Muslims, refugees there, really. They appreciated my presence, my effort to learn Arabic, to speak somehow, because some of them, they couldn't speak English, and no one spoke Slovak. So I found it difficult, really. But I would say maybe the importance of education, but education with values also, and education which does not ignore also religion as important. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Father GIRASEK, also for bringing this human touch into this debate. We have less than half an hour for questions and continuation of the debate, and more thoughts to think of than for this remaining time, but we hope that the thinking will be also happening beyond this panel, obviously. Do we have questions? Yes, we have a gentleman over there. If you could maybe please introduce yourself, because there is a microphone behind you.
Okay. My name is András László. I'm from Hungarian origin, but I've been living here for more than half a century, so I'm very much integrated in this society. I was the kickoff speaker triggered a lot of ideas and emotions in me, and all the distinguished speakers as well, and allow me to broaden, or between brackets, the framework. With all respect, there was a French poet, Paul Valéry, who in 1919 wrote a fantastic text, La crise de l'esprit, the cries of the human spirit. There was another French author, Marcel Proust, who said that the real act of discovery is not discovery of new lands, but seeing with new eyes. So I think the human being is in crisis, not the economy, not the society, not models, but the human being. And there was much talk about, Cecile talked about how do we define identity. You spoke about manifold identities. So what's an identity? We have millions of identities in ourselves, but we don't know it yet. We don't remember it. So my provocative question is to all the panelists is, isn't it time that human beings should be reinvented? That there is an alignment between heart, mind, and body, and spirit. And then we come not only to the 3 T's, but the 4 T's, that we have the T of transformation, and let's bold the T of transcendence. Thank you.
Thank you. Who from the panelists would like to start to answer this very deep question?
Jesuits.
Maybe I would say maybe this way, question about identity. It can be taken different way. Philosophically, theologically, anthropologically. I would say, maybe in my view, what I see is important that to see our connection with ourselves, with this world, not to be detached, because I like very much the words of Pope Francis in his encyclical Laudato Si, which is so inclusive, really. And I would say that's the question that, first of all, who we are part of this ground. This is, so it's important to know kind of technocracy or whatever, or alienations. It's not part of what makes us really human. But and if you see the wars, the hatred, what's going, that is neglecting or washing away everything, nature, human, everything. So totally destroying.
Because the borders are also in ourselves. They are not they are all physical, embodied. We are the borders of our own. Aren't we?
I think I completely, building upon what you said, is the fact that we have to realize that how intricate all these issues are, and I think what is really problematic is not so much about reforming the humans and what we're supposed to be, but to be the human we need to be. And somehow I feel we fell short to the challenge, because right now, though again we live in what is looking more and more into a global society, because we're interconnected, we have information from what's going on everywhere. For some reasons, our policy options do not fit that reality, and we haven't made that kind of quantum leap yet to get there. And I think it's something that will take several generations, but we have to aspire to get to that point. Because we also have to understand that what's happening in different parts of the world will impact us. And it's really in our self-interest to address those issues and to do it in a way that is inclusive and that makes sense. And I think really, just taking this refugee crisis, most of it comes from the situation in Iraq and of course in Syria. We've been talking about it for years. We knew this was coming. The moment you have a crisis of this magnitude, obviously you're going to have displacement of population. So it's about also us and I say us again, I shouldn't, but as European Union, to put our act together and to have policy options that are coherent across the border. We give ourselves the common vision. We have common values, but for some reasons we fell short to operate them into concrete common policies. One being to act together in terms of our foreign policy, to be able to deal with those crises in our immediate neighborhood in a way that makes sense, so we don't wait for these disasters to happen. So I think we have built the European Union, but somehow we are deserting the house. And whereas there are so many other things that need to be built, and I do think that the Europeans are so important as more leaders of more, because we have very important moral values that we should have held, and we are deserting them at the moment. I think this is a real moral crisis we are facing. I'm sorry to be so negative, but this is how I feel also as a European citizen, beyond my function as a United Nations official.
It's well accepted. Europe was one of very important parts to learn globally for the 21st century. And I mentioned the 21st and 20th century. We are in the same space, which was so bloody or conflicting in the 20th century that world wars came out from this continent. Mass graves and such inhuman treatments or inventions like gas chambers or concentration camps or gulags. made in Europe, made in some parts of. And we don't need to reinvent human being, but to rediscover or discover humanity, who we are, why human dignity should be respected and is something what possess inviolable rights. I believe that such persons like Abuna Frans in Syria showed the example of full humanity, total humanity. And we know some inhuman fanatics, whether they dwell on ideology or religion or politics or ethnical roots, who destroy others, kill others, just because they have some political or other objectives, now and in this time. And it was always with humanity. And what I want to underline from the last part of your question is that it is about good and evil, or good and bad. And it's not about good guys and bad guys, those are bad and those are good, because this dividing line, this freedom is in us, and we may decide what we care for, what we want to promote. And this leadership in humanity from Europe means majority. We care for the good, for the common good. And it's good for us, it's selfish, it's good for us, and it's good for everybody, because good is good. And what's rediscovering here is that what is the most important in life is growing via sharing, love, happiness, hope, joy. If you want more, you have to share, otherwise you lose. And if we discover this, we are rich. If we don't, we are poor. We may have a bank account, or even several, but actually we are poor, rich, or rich, poor. So that's a message about rediscovering humanity. And Europe has probably the most volume of lessons of both sides. And we should share positive lessons like European integration, which is based on universal principle, model which doesn't have any better alternative, unity in diversity. We are all one family, everybody is original, everybody is different, not just some.
Thank you very much. We have two questions over there, maybe one in the front. So, gentlemen, just over there.
I'm Francesco Di Lillo, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in Brussels. I have a question for Father GIRASEK. Of course, thank you very much to all of the speakers who contributed, but it's also open to everyone. I would like to start from your last question during your presentation. You say, is this program really just for children? And well, it is an amazing thing that you're doing in Lebanon. In fact, my question is, are you aware of any similar program for adults, for the parents of these children, that would help them get a better understanding of each other's faith? And also, would something similar would be helpful for some of our politicians in general, or civil servants, to get a better understanding of each other's religious view, to help Muslims in particular, since we were talking, this has been the subject of most of our meetings here, integrate in our European societies?
Thank you for your question. I would say that to extend to, my knowledge, I don't know whether we have exact or similar program for the parents. This program was born by communication with me and Fatima, really, and in this very special context. So we use it there, and it worked. Then I left Lebanon. But what we have, let's say, and what is bringing parents together is really like parents meeting with regards to the schooling of their kids. So different parents were coming together, and it wasn't also something what is to take it for granted, I would say, because they came together, but they are also from different political views, or ethnical. So, but they were in an environment which was important for them, for their kids. So they respected each other. But this doesn't mean that there doesn't exist a program. I don't know, really. And the question about bringing politics together and to learn, I think maybe to learn is always good when I'm open to learn. So when I want to know, really. I would say maybe one quotation of Saint Augustine. Okay, sorry if I put this, but he was a very good philosopher as well. He said, and we can make like quotation similar to him. He said, for whom wants to believe, I have 1,000 reasons. For whom doesn't, I have no one. So for whom wants to learn, I can offer a lot. But if someone doesn't want, I have nothing to offer. So maybe this would be, definitely, I think, a good idea.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the second question.
My name is David Bielik. I'm from Slovakia. Therefore, I have a rather national question addressed to Mr. FIGEЛ and Mr. DZURINDA. As you may know, Slovakia has completely different opinion towards migration crisis, and which is not so in line with the common European solution. Therefore, I'd like to ask, what do you think? How can this attitude can impact the upcoming Slovak presidency of the Council of the European Union? And the second question would be, what would you do if you were in shoes of Slovak government in order to solve this not so good image of Slovakia nowadays in the European Union? Thank you very much.
I still have one comment to the previous answer. I would like to dwell on what Peter GIRASEK said on teaching or learning importance. As we were younger, we quoted it from Lenin, Učica, učica, učica. I used to quote it as commissioner from Tony Blair, 3 priorities for United Kingdom: education, education, education. But the difference is what to learn and whom to learn from. And that's something where I think we should always distinct or differentiate what to learn and from whom, because there is wisdom to learn and there are also stupid things to learn. On migration, refugees, Slovakia, migration and even persecution of those who do not believe or are different is part of human history. And here I want to underline Christ, Jesus Christ as a kid was just from the beginning persecuted. To help those who are persecuted is a human solidarity, and of course we have to help reasonably on a serious ground. Therefore, I want to speak on myself, because how can I speak on behalf of government? We spoke for more than a year that there is a genocide going on in the Middle East, especially on the territories of Syria and Iraq. And genocide is the brutal or the worst international crime of crimes. And if there is a genocide, we are obliged, not maybe, we are due to act, to stop, to eliminate genocide, and to help those who are victims. This is duty of each government, democratic government. So therefore we promoted assistance to those who are persecuted. We invited, for example, a year ago, a witness from Damascus, Patriarch Gregorios III Laham, to speak in Slovakia what's going on there. He spoke a lot, publicly, in media, and mostly about the assistance to those who stayed there, because those are in the worst situation, not those who moved to other continent, to Europe, but those who are in the areas under bombardment or persecution. And I think that this should be more visible, more efficient. We have ways and means, but also people who are ready to help. On presidency, it's difficult to see cohesion and trustful cooperation in an area where a country is suing, disputing the position of the Union, but that's for the government to answer this question. I think it was more political than case-oriented or legal, but of course there is right to table such a proposal, and there is for the court to decide. But Europe really needs more common maturity and action, because if we want to keep up Schengen, we need also more common approach where more and more countries are in and minorities at the external border. So there is a logic. If less countries care about the freedom of all or comfort of all, then we need to do something together at the external borders. And this is the issue to be discussed, but also decided and implemented on a really credible, efficient manner in combination of national and European forces. This is not Europe against the others or Europe on behalf of, but together, because competences in this area are very sensitive. It is security, in a way defense, and of course basic freedoms. And we need to keep up Europe free, but also safe. Mikuláš.
I have been touched or addressed by the discussion more as a human being than a politician, but your question is putting us more to the politics again. My feeling or conviction is that the position of the Slovak government or even Visegrad 4 is not sustainable. Not only because of the reasons which have been mentioned by our panelists, but also politically. This morning, I was listening very carefully to the discussion. Sturza Institute organized a panel dealing with migration. And I agree with a statement that the protection of our external border, we are united in this proclamation. In this issue, we are hugely united in Europe. We need to protect our external borders. But I have never met any politician who would say that this is a national competence. Everybody knows that we are able to protect, to defend our borders only together. The second reason why I feel that the position of Visegrad 4 or even Slovakia is not sustainable is that I'm thinking more and more how to deal with the root causes of this crisis. How to eliminate so crazy people as Bashar Assad, for instance. And I feel very strongly, and again, a guy this morning invented that it would be fantastic to build something like Hong Kong in the north of Africa. I'm in favor. I wouldn't speak about Hong Kong. Maybe I would prefer to speak about security zones. I sent the Slovak troops to Afghanistan, to Iraq, also to Kosovo, to defend the Serbs minorities after the separation or independence of Kosovo. I feel very strongly that we should touch the root causes of these difficulties, because I am a little bit worried. I fully agree with many of your ideas. I was listening very carefully, and you have mentioned the phenomenon of pace. Pace is very important. If we will only react, I'm afraid about the future, about our ability to absorb such huge waves of immigrants. So my last point is that being in the shoes of the Prime Minister of Slovakia in these days, I would call on my partners in Europe, including Germany, France, UK, for touching or eliminating the root causes of these difficulties, especially in Iraq, in Syria, in the Middle East, but also in Africa. Because I feel that there is a huge potential in Africa. Boko Haram is equally crazy like ISIS and many different fanatics in Africa. And we should be ready to share the burden. The burden coming from the need to protect, to defend our external borders, but also to touch the root causes of these difficulties. We can act only together as Europeans. It means that the Slovak citizens, the Slovak inhabitants, the inhabitants of the Visegrad 4 should enjoy freedom, security, but also expenditure of these profits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The time is running very fast, but I wouldn't like to conclude without having an opportunity giving the opportunity to our panelists for a kind of final remarks. And if you maybe could address the issue of being a little bit more proactive rather than reactive to the crisis from your perspective, and also how to defend the kind of erosion of solidarity which we are facing. So maybe if you could, in 1 minute, 2 minutes, focus on these issues and include your concluding remarks you would like to share with us, and then we will conclude the panel. Thank you. So I don't know who wants to start. Cecile?
Ladies first.
I think, looking forward, we've been talking a lot about the responsibility of Europe and Europeans, both citizens and politicians, and I think really it's important to work on those two levels, because it's not only about politics, it's also about how us as
I would agree, of course, once again, that education, 1 time, 3 times, lifelong, is the most preventive, the best preventive or prevention policy, whether we think about social cohesion or global international awareness or actions supporting development in poor countries or lagging behind regions. Secondly, solidarity was always the cement of the house. If the solidarity is out of the European construction, the house will fall apart. It will not sustain. And British have a very good saying, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Don't be penny wise with small change and pound foolish. Europe, European Union, European integration, European cooperation, peace, stability, prosperity means much more than inability or adolescence of some groups or politicians not to address the problem, rather misuse it for political short-term objectives. And we need real solutions. We need functioning solidarity because it pays back. It is valuable. It is our interest. If solidarity is missing, then we will be losers at all, and especially those countries which are more vulnerable. So I want to just remind that without solidarity, there wouldn't be European Union, European integration. We don't have anything better. It's easy to criticize, more difficult to improve, to shape, to form. But the new countries or new members, now Slovakia will chair the team or orchestra, first time ever, has a role to shape, to play, to moderate, not only, which is easy, to criticize. And I think this is a sign of maturity, and I wish European Union to have mature countries, mature citizens. We need it, and that's future.
Thank you very much, Father GIRASEK.
I would say maybe there was one article, one journalist made kind of projection how certain measures affected, let's say, positively measures towards refugees or IDPs or migrants, positively the future, the society, and why. So I would say maybe in this way it's good to see on this, migration as a challenge, and see it really what I have to do now in order that in 10, 15, 20 years will bring positive change in, let's say, in Europe, in those countries for that people. And my conviction, personal conviction, is that Europe has something to offer, really, and has responsibility because of that. And maybe we are, if I can say as a European, maybe preoccupied sometimes too much with us, too much, and we are forgetting something which is more crucial, really, because it's different whether someone is dying, starving, and it's different whether we have different views but we are not sharing it, whatever. It's good to acknowledge the weight of different problems that are not the same. So I would say positively that it's a challenge, really. It's a challenge, and we have to take a risk. It's always a risk. To do good is always a risk, because it can be somehow maybe misunderstood, whatever. But if I'm not doing it, I'm already, I lost already. So to do good, I would say.
Thank you very much. I would like to finish with words of another Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and that's why Janko has already quoted twice the Brits. I'm going to use another quote now, so I really hope that they are not going to leave the house of the European Union, because they will be hardly missed. And it's the quote, or I will paraphrase the quote, "Never let the good challenge go to waste." Well, on this note, I would like to finish. I hope we have fulfilled the task we were given by the Wilfried Martens Center to create a net and to work. I think we're working quite hard. I'm sure that we'll be working in our minds further, because a lot of the thoughts shared here need some time and reflection in the future. Thank you very much again to the Wilfried Martens Center. Thank you to the president of the Wilfried Martens Center. Thank you to the foundation of Anton Tunega. Thank you to you because of your comments and your inputs. And thank you to those who are following us over net. And have a nice evening. Thank you very much.